let's discuss the outcome of the war between Iran and the US and Israel. So, in brief, all the United States and Israel managed to do to Iran is delay their nuclear program by a few months at most. And on the flip side, what the Iranians did is they gave the Israelis quite a shock or a rude awakening or a wake-up call or a military display that they've never experienced ever. I mean, if you look at all of the previous wars that the Israelis have fought, whether we're talking about 48 or about 67 or 73 or 56, whatever it is, right? Nothing compares to what happened with Iran. You know, having Tel Aviv and Haifa hit in the first place, but also on that kind of scale and with those kinds of weapons, never happened. And having the United States also have to come and back them up. And I think they depleted around 20% of their THAAD stockpiles, which frankly, I mean, when I heard that, honestly, those people should be fired for incompetence. I mean, you putting all of those missiles, that kind of military expenditure is just madness in that short of a time period. So you can imagine if that had gone on for a month, I mean, the Israelis and Americans simply wouldn't be able to cope, and they could hardly cope as it is. And Iran weren't even using their best missiles. But basically, what happened in the first couple of days is the Americans were saying, well, yeah, we completely destroyed Fordow, which is one of the Iranian nuclear sites, because they hit Natanz, Fordow, and Isfahan. And, oh yeah, the program is dead. And you had some people joking that, well, great, so next time we ever hear about Iranian nukes, we'll know that you're full of it, because you just said that you destroyed their nuclear program. And I told you, while those strikes were taking place, right, or just after they'd taken place, that the Fordow facility is about 80 meters underground. It's beneath a mountain. And my prediction, because I've been covering the Iran nuclear deal for 4 or 5 years now, on the ground, is that you would cause minimal damage. And I turned out to be right. So in the worst case scenario, they've maybe destroyed the entrances, and now it's going to be a question of trying to get basically resume or regain access into those facilities. That's one scenario. But the other scenario, and I think this is perhaps more likely and makes more sense broadly, is that the Iranians don't keep all of their eggs in one basket, right? These are just the facilities that we know about. There are facilities, for example, that the IAEA discovered like 10 years ago that were not hidden, but not disclosed either, right? So it's not that the Iranians were keeping it from them per se, but basically it's a big country. You catch my drift. So Grossi right now, the head of the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna, he's complaining and saying that, well, the Iranians have 400.8 kilograms of highly enriched uranium. When he says highly, he's referring to 60%, not more, that have disappeared or whatever. I mean, he acts like, the Iranians just like pulled them out he pulled the rug out from underneath them and just like ran off with a bunch of crate loads of uranium or something. No, I think what happened is that they put them in strategic, basically in safe places around the country. And that is why I'm saying that their nuclear program has barely been delayed. And as a matter of fact, that's his assessment too. Okay, so for the first couple of days, the Americans were saying, oh yeah, it's destroyed, we won, blah, 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 we're so tough, we're so good, blah, blah, blah. And now they're conceding, we're having these leaks coming out. Again, you're free to believe that, what you will, but you have these leaks coming out. CNN reported this, that according to Defense Intelligence Assessment, that the Iranians actually, their nuclear capabilities have not been reduced. Now, you could argue that, well, that's just the Israelis and the Americans, making up more reasons to go after Iran because they didn't succeed in regime change. And sure, that's definitely a valid hypothesis. Nothing far-fetched about that whatsoever. But I'm telling you, because I know this topic backwards, the Iranians, despite all the hits they've taken, from computer viruses to bombings to sabotaging the power supply, and all of these facilities and scientists and commanders that have been taken out, it never, ever worked at actually crippling their nuclear program. It just never work. As a matter of fact, it helped accelerate the nuclear program. Okay, so every time they would kill a senior scientist like Fakhrizadeh, or when they bombed Natanz in April 2021, the response was, okay, well, screw you, we're going to go to 20%, we're going to go to 60% respectively. So it never worked. And Iran is a big country, and this is not a country that has like 5 scientists or something, or whatever kind of image they like to project to you, that the Israelis are so fucking smart, like they have galaxy-sized brains, and the Mossad is hiding under your bed. Watch out, don't breathe, or else you're an anti-Semite. Meanwhile, the Iranians, they're so backwards. No, it's actually quite the contrary from the image they tried to paint about the Iranians. The Iranians have, first of all, a bloody nuclear program. I think that speaks for itself. They are booming in nanotechnology. They've got their own space program. They have got thousands of not just scientists, but IT experts and engineers that are young, that are freshly out of college, that have really great capabilities. I mean, you remember they were hacking, for example, the Mossad. They were carrying out all these massive hacks that the Israelis were complaining about during the last couple of years. So if they really had they didn't have a pool of brains to choose from in all of these fields, how on earth would they constitute any sort of quote unquote threat, right? If they were really not that capable, why do we keep talking about them then? Obviously, they're very capable. That's the whole point, isn't it? So, just to go back to the notion that their program has been destroyed, I find that very hard to believe, extraordinarily hard to believe, because the evidence is not there for it. And given the past instances of attacks that the Israelis and Americans have carried out, they've failed in every respect. They not only failed to destroy their capabilities, they helped accelerate. So I wouldn't be surprised right now if what Grossi says is true. And I'll read you his statement. So he said that. So he said Iran could again enrich uranium in a matter of months, okay? And I know people are going nuts seeing that and saying, he's just running propaganda. No. I agree with this assessment. You have to remember when Netanyahu, people keep posting these clips of Netanyahu where he says, like, in 1992, Iran is a few years away from a bomb. And then a few years later, when that time has passed, he's saying the same thing again. But he wasn't lying. Look, in nuclear science, okay, and especially when we talk about nuclear weapons programs, there's something called breakout time, okay? Breakout time is the amount of time it takes you to enrich just enough uranium to make a bomb, okay? Enough fissile material. The Iranians have always had the capability. When I say always, I mean, if in the last 3 decades, right? But especially the last 2 decades. They've always had that capability. They just never used it. So it's like you've got someone who's, you've got a runner who's about to start a race, and they're still at the starting position. They're at the starting line, but they're not moving. Okay. So if I know that they need 1 minute to do a lap, and they just never move, they just stay fixed like a statue at the starting line. I can keep telling you every year, hey, he's 1 minute away from crossing a finish line, and it would be technically true. It's just that they're not moving. It doesn't mean that Netanyahu was lying. Do you understand? What he was lying about is that they're after a nuclear bomb. That was the lie. Okay? So, yes, if they wanted to build a nuclear bomb, they could do one in whatever time Netanyahu was saying, right? I'm not saying everything he said was true, but right now, I would guess they need a few months, like Grossi is saying. So, yes, they just need a few months, or they just need a few years to get enough fissile material to break out. But that doesn't mean that they're building a fucking bomb. That's not proof of them having a weapons program. That's the lie that Netanyahu was telling. He was speaking about Iran like it's a foregone conclusion that they had already taken a decision to build a bomb, and they were in the process of doing it, which they weren't. And there's no evidence for that, and there still isn't any evidence for that. Do you understand? It's very, very important to be clear about this, because posting those clips of Netanyahu, it shows a complete fucking misunderstanding about nuclear science, about Iran, and about what he's lying about specifically. We know Netanyahu's a liar, but if you don't know what he's lying about, I mean, it doesn't really bode well for you, does it? So I think I want to be very, very clear about that. Okay, and the same thing with Grossi right now. When Grossi's saying, yeah, they're a few months away, or they're a few months away from being able to enrich again. So he's not necessarily saying they're going to build a bomb. He's saying that just resume enrichment. He's right. I also believe this. I think that Iran has enough technology, technical capital. They've got the brains and the industry to rebuild the best centrifuges. So those are the IR-6 and IR-8s, and get back to work. Yeah, they can do that. Iran has not been crippled. The government has not been removed or ousted. They've still got, the country's intact. So yeah, they can go back to work. And that's assuming the worst case, where they can't get back into their facilities because the entrances have been caved in and so on by those bunker buster bombs. And so do you understand the nuance here with what I'm saying and what's being alleged and what's being said? I know it's a bit tricky, right? It's not like with Iraq where there was fucking nothing. There was no civilian nuclear program. There was literally nothing, right? But we have to be nuanced here. It's not, again, I think you all know I'm the last one to give Netanyahu any credit, but I do like to be very factual with this, and you have to know how to catch them with the lies. It's the lies, not that they're X months away or whatever from a bomb. It's that they're not fucking planning to build a bomb. That's the lie. It's the easiest conclusion, right? And the most obvious one is that they are not building a bomb, simply, period. So we don't even need to talk about the breakout time because it's bloody irrelevant. Right? It's irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant because they're not building one, period. So just to show you here, the Iranians, what they've decided, they've gone ahead now and they passed this in the Mejlis, which is the parliament. They passed a bill suspending cooperation with the IAEA, with the International Atomic Energy Agency. Now, just to be clear, when I say suspend, I do not mean end, okay? So they have not pulled out of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And remember that they also signed the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement and the Additional Protocol and the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. So, there was partial withdrawal from the JCPOA. That's the thing the US left, the nuclear deal from 2015. The CSA, a Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement, and the Additional Protocol, these allow the IAEA to go in and monitor, with a lot more, in a lot more detail than they normally would just with the NPT, which is kind of the base agreement that a country would sign with the agency. So the NPT is just about not spreading, nuclear weapons. It's saying I commit as a country, we commit to just harnessing nuclear energy for civilian purposes, nothing more. But the CSA and the AP permit the IAEA to then conduct additional verification for additional transparency. And of course, that's helpful if you then want to go and say convince someone like the United States who's being a dickhead that you're not pursuing a nuclear bomb. So you can show them the receipts and then say, hey, go ahead and lift the sanctions. There's no bomb. Okay, do you understand? So that's kind of like the straightforward version. It's well explained, isn't it? But anyway, look, what now the Mejlis decided is to suspend cooperation. Now, they did pass this bill before. They passed a similar one before after Fakhrizadeh, who was considered the chief or the most senior scientist in the nuclear program, when he was assassinated just outside of Tehran in his car by the Israelis. And the difference is that when that was passed, the Mejlis, the parliament okayed it, but then it wasn't ratified because in Iran, the way it works is that the bill then has to go to the Guardian Council. It's a bit like, in the US where, just to draw kind of broad analogies, where something gets passed in the House, then it goes to the Senate, okay? It's sort of the same thing, yeah? And then, because this is a nuclear file, because it's the nuclear issue, it's a bit more sensitive. So it also falls under the purview of the Supreme Leader, or Khamenei, and also the hold on, I'm just trying to pull up the vote. I need to give you the exact number. I think it's 222 or 221. Yeah. So it was passed overwhelmingly by 221 yes votes, or votes in favor, 0 against, and I think there's 1 abstention. Okay, that's the one they just passed, yeah? So, that's passed by the Mejlis, by the parliament. Then it goes to the Guardian Council, which ratified it. This time they ratified it. That happened on the 26th of June. And then, of course, it's still going to be looked at by the president, who is also part of the president and also and Khamenei. So, they're going to look at that through the Guardian Council and also the Supreme National Security Council, the SNSC. So basically, these, it doesn't function the same way as the UK does or the US does, but you have to understand, because the nuclear issue is so sensitive in Iran. It's not like like other bills where it would go from the Mejlis to the Guardian Council and then it goes to the president, and then if he doesn't do anything after 2 weeks, it automatically gets passed by the Speaker of the House. Okay, the nuclear file is more sensitive. It's a bigger issue in Iran, and that's why it needs to be looked at by multiple branches of government. Okay, just to make that very, very clear. But the fact that this has already been ratified by the Guardian Council, and just given the war that just took place, there's no doubt in my mind that the position of Khamenei and the Iranian president is not going to differ whatsoever, and of course the Supreme National Security Council. So I'm just gonna show you. Here's a photograph of the Mejlis, by the way. Okay. So you can see that on the screen. And yeah, so now of course Grossi's complaining that they can't view the files, and they can't view the meters. They can't get in and see what happened to the sites and all these things. And I mean, honestly, you have to laugh, you have to laugh, because all that's been going on is really the IAEA has been kind of just like green lighting this whole witch hunt the whole time. And I know people are still saying this thing that, oh, Grossi passed intelligence. I still haven't seen a fucking ounce of proof about that. I'm not doubting it. It wouldn't surprise me one bit. As a matter of fact, I think you don't get that job unless you're going somehow to be giving that intelligence along. But honestly, the UN is bugged enough that you don't need to really be participant. You're going to get spied on regardless. Anyway, and you should look at how many commanders and scientists were killed in Iran for you to understand that the security, Israel's intelligence on Iran's nuclear program, it doesn't depend on one man in Vienna. Okay, they have other means, and they've been using them for a long time. But obviously, if that were true, that he was giving and passing intelligence along, first of all, it wouldn't surprise me, and second of all, that would put in the credibility of the whole agency into question, and the United Nations, right? And I think there's been enough foul play for it to be put into question a long time ago already. But also, it would give Iran what it needs to just say, well, screw you, we're pulling out of the NPT. And that is also something that people have been wondering, well, why didn't they just pull out of the NPT, of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and all the other things, the AP, CSA, and JCPOA? Because, if you're just suspending cooperation, once again, we go back to this thing that Iran keeps doing, where they're like, they get bombed, they get attacked, they get hit with assassinations by the Israelis, by the Americans, and then they just keep going back to diplomacy, right? There's no like hard break or hard stop. And I mean, look, they're of course doing what they see or how they see fit. They're doing as they see fit, or how they think is best to move in that situation. So I don't have all of the intelligence and data and avenues in front of me to make the same kind of decisions that they are, and neither do you. But just broadly speaking, if we look at the timeline of how Iran has been so lenient, right? That's the point I made in my other expose about their whole nuclear program, and how they've tried over and over to engage in diplomacy. My point is just that they keep getting bollocked around by the West, by the IAEA, by the Board of Governors, by the US, by the UK, by France, Germany, the EU. They keep screwing them around, no matter how nice and how nice they play and how transparent they are. That's my point. And that has been also the position of, I think, a lot of the principalists or hardliners, quote unquote, right? And their position has now become the mainstream in Iran. So, these even people who are so-called reformists like Zarif, who negotiated the nuclear deal, you should see the kind of fire that he's been spouting at Grossi the other day. It's quite. I mean, maybe it's just bluster, who knows? But there's no room now anymore in Iran for that kind of position. So everyone is kind of like, well, screw you guys. And that's why that bill was passed with an absolute majority, like not even one vote against. I mean, that is really saying something. Not one vote against, okay? But again, it's just a suspension. And it does beg the question, why haven't they pulled out of the NPT? Now, I'm not saying, like, I'm not advocating, me personally, that, yeah, they should just fucking build a nuclear bomb. Let's all kill each other. No. I think, besides, building a nuclear bomb is the point of that is to use as a deterrent, unless you're the United States and you just love murdering Japanese civilians. But Iran is not the United States. So obviously we do mean that in a deterrent capacity. So many people are wondering, well, why don't they do that? And I think, honestly, if they don't decide to take a hard turn right now in their foreign policy, they're going to come to regret it. It's just my opinion, my analysis rather. It's not my personal opinion. It's just my analysis. And I say that because you have to remember that we're not just talking about Iran and Israel and the US and that they're in a vacuum. No. Remember, there's Lebanon, there's Gaza, there's this whole genocide that's been going on that is completely and utterly and absolutely related to this. So, for example, when they killed Haniyeh in Tehran, that by itself, it shows you that something changed in the calculus or in the equation. When they went and killed Nasrallah as well, the Israelis started doing things that they would have never dared to do in the past. And for whatever reason that is, maybe I don't think it was a lack of intelligence or capability, but rather because it was simply considered too much of an escalation. And that changed. That calculus changed. So we're no longer dealing with this this scenario or this reality of asymmetrical warfare, or where Iran is able to exert influence or a lot of influence through its so-called proxies, quote unquote. I hate that word, like as if Israel's not a US proxy, right? It's regional allies, okay? And you have to remember that all of its regional allies have been weakened too. So Syria is gone, right? Hezbollah has been hollowed out. It's not gone, but it's hollowed out. You know, the Palestinians are suffering a genocide. This is not the same Middle East or region or dynamic that we're talking about, for example, you know, 2-3 years ago. It just isn't. So the calculus has changed. And in Iran, I feel like if they don't pull out of the NPT at this point, after all of the crap that they have done to prove themselves and to be transparent, and then they still get bombed. And on top of that, remember the day they got bombed on June, so 12th going to 13th, that's the day the IAEA said that they were reneging on their NPT commitments. So they weren't saying Iran is you know, not being cooperative. They were saying it wasn't fulfilling its basic commitments and responsibilities under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is bloody madness. That is, I mean, that's really a stretch. That was, and that's what I mean when the IAEA has been the real, you know, the really deadly role that they've been fulfilling. It's not Grossi or whoever the hell is in charge of giving intelligence, which the Americans and the Brits take anyway. It's the fact that they've been writing these reports, and then, you know, the Board of Governors, which is made up of member states, which include the UK and Germany and so on, use that report to then go and piss on Iran, even though Iran is being very cooperative. You understand? That I think, this manufacturing of consent, and then of course all these shitheads at Reuters and so on, they'll go and repeat the lie, and they'll frame it like, oh, the IAEA says Iran is not doing this and that, you know, and they help fan those flames of fucking WMDs like with Iraq. It's the same kind of mentality and the same basic lie. Do you understand? That's really the danger of what they've been doing, and the recklessness of their behavior. And that's why Grossi's banned from going to Iran now. Well, not officially banned, but he's certainly, you could say, a de facto persona non grata. And the fact that they've suspended cooperation is basically the legal basis for that. Okay, so he cannot go to Iran now. You know, it's the Speaker of the Parliament of the Mejlis was railing against him and so on. But you understand, my point is that it's that the Iranians, they need to take a hard turn, in my opinion, right now. They need to really make a big decision. So, you know, I don't think it's going to cut it anymore to say, okay, well, you know, we'll suspend cooperation to show that we're really kind of mad at you, and then we'll resume cooperation. I don't think that's going to cut it, because you're dealing with an unhinged, even more unhinged Israel and United States. And remember that all of this was about the missiles originally. It's not really about the nuclear file. It's not really about their nuclear capabilities. This was always to do with their ballistic missiles and their regional support. That's really why they went after the Iranians, why they pulled out of the nuclear deal, and why they sanctioned them, because they wanted to cripple their economy. Now, the Iranians have lost 2 wartime chiefs of staff in this war. That is an unbelievable security lapse. I mean, it's unforgivable, honestly. I've never seen that. To lose 1 chief of staff is you know, maybe understandable because it's a bloody war, but 2 in a week is something deep. There's something deeper going on here. And again, it's not because the Mossad are fucking geniuses and all this like hype that they try to sell you. No, because you've seen that there's an article that just came out. I forget whether it was New York Times. It's usually New York Times that peddles this for them, but they've been, you know, it's been wired to a bunch of outlets about how the Mossad had penetrated, you know, all sectors of the Iranians nuclear industry and sector, and it's a bunch of bollocks. Every single time they pull off a massive assassination campaign, they do this. They did the same thing after Fakhrizadeh. They said, oh, they smuggled in an automatic gun piece by piece, and you know, now they said they were building the drones inside of Tehran. I mean, look, I'm not saying it's 100% false or that it's 100. We should just dismiss it, you know, just because the Israelis have a propensity to lie. I'm sure some of it is true, right? To a certain extent. I just don't know how much of it is true. That's what my point. And also, it, you know, we shouldn't give them, because the point of that is also to wage psychological warfare, and also to kind of sell, to market, to hype up their own capabilities in front of the rest of the world. And I'm not going to do that unless I see some bloody evidence. There is no evidence in this new piece that's been published, this fan fiction that's just come out. There are no classified documents. There's no receipts. There's nothing. It's just like we're supposed to blindly believe them. Well, sorry, I'm not going to do that. Okay, because they always do this kind of stuff, and it's the same thing with their cyber warfare. They need to hype themselves up so they can go and sell weapons and also scare people. Remember, part of it is scaring their so-called allies into submission. So that, if they posture themselves as being omnipotent and basically all encompassing in military and intelligence affairs, who is going to want to fuck with them? You're going to think twice before you screw with them, right? Or rather, before you do anything that displeases them. I don't think anyone particularly wants to piss them off. It's just that they want to keep people in line, especially their allies, their life support, which they depend on. So you understand there's a multifaceted thinking behind that stuff. And don't forget that the Israelis have a military censor. You don't get to publish shit. You'll go to jail. If you're an Israeli journalist, you will go to prison for publishing something that the military does not okay. Do you understand? It's nothing to do with wartime. That's a permanent state of affairs. You will go to jail. You will be jailed if you do not get permission from the army first, okay? So you have to keep that in mind, that this has been curated and it's been filtered and it's gone past the military and military intelligence before it's allowed to be published. Okay, so always keep that in mind about what Israeli journalists are saying about their technical capabilities. And so here's Trump talking earlier about Iran.
We knew they had.
This is after the so-called ceasefire. I mean, again, a ceasefire implies that they signed a deal together and so on. It's more like a cessation of hostilities, I believe Merendi very eloquently and correctly pointed out earlier. And that's very well said. Indeed, it's a cessation of hostilities more than anything else. And honestly, knowing the Americans, knowing the Israelis, do they ever respect a diplomatic agreement? They won't even respect, a basic judicial order from another government, never mind, or their own diplomatic notes, never mind a bloody ceasefire with someone that they don't like. As you saw in Lebanon and as you saw in Gaza and so on. I mean, Trump himself helped the Israelis violate the ceasefire in Gaza. He was president when they did that, and he keeps giving them the bombs and everything. And, he lied about wanting a ceasefire in Ukraine. So, and the one in Lebanon was non-existent. So anyway, take everything they say with a bloody kilo of salt, not just a pinch. But here he is talking about Iran.
A lot of sites, probably 3 plus the one. But they had 3 main sites, and we knew they're going to have to either give them up. And I thought we could do it during negotiation, and we just about had it done. And then they said, we want enrichment. Enrichment doesn't mean like air conditioning, and it doesn't mean to jack up your car. Enrichment is a bad word. And I said, you got so much oil, what do you need that for? And they said, well, we need it. And
what the fuck is this guy smoking, honestly? Enrichment is a bad word. No, it's not really, actually. You need to enrich uranium to 3%, 3% to have a functioning civilian nuclear program. That's what the JCPOA had it at, 3.67%. Enriched uranium. The bad word. I said it. This guy, he looks completely loopy and out of it.
I wouldn't let that happen. I think people wouldn't have understood it if I allowed that to happen. So we had a 60-day talk. And that delayed them a lot. And then we said, let's go at it. And it just worked out. And we wanted to work out also for Iran. They were beaten up. And so was Israel, in all fairness. They were both very tired. We call it the 12-day war. That was an intensive war.
You see that little slip of the tongue right there where he said that the Israelis were also a bit, beaten up or shooken up. It's precisely for those kinds of things that they don't like having Trump as president, when preferable, right? When possible, rather. It's exactly for those kinds of, unfiltered comments coming out that basically give the game away. That they prefer having Democrats in charge because, after all, the neoconservatives are in both parties now. So, I mean, if you know anything about the United States and U.S. foreign policy, you would know that. So if you can have the same kind of weapons being delivered for a genocide and to bomb Iran, but without the US president giving the game away about how you got your ass beaten by the Iranians, who are supposed to be technologically inferior and so weak that we could take them on, supposedly, well then, preferably you do that, right? But anyway, I'll let the man finish.
But the thing that I wanted to do, and I've said it on your show, if you look back 30 years ago or 25 years, we've been doing your show a long time and nobody like you. But you look back at the early interviews, I would say Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. They've wanted this for years, and they were weeks away.
I can't stand it when they say these things like Iran can or cannot. Who the fuck asked you? Who are you? Do you rule Iran? Did someone make you the fucking viceroy of Persia? That's a good one. Who the fuck are you, mate? It's like, they do this all the time. Like Russia can do the right. How about you can go fuck yourself, right, Mr. America? Yeah, Mr. Uncle Sam. Why don't you go fuck yourself? Okay. Who are you to start giving orders around to what Russia can do or China can do or Syria can do? Why don't you go do yourself?
Away from getting it. And those pilots went in there with those beautiful planes and the most sophisticated bombs anywhere in the world. Think of it, they can go 30 stories deep into granite. Who would think that's even possible? And they did obliterate it, it turned out. Then we had to suffer the fake news, where the fake news in CNN and the New York Times was saying, well, maybe it wasn't as good as Trump said. Maybe it wasn't totally obliterated, but it was destroyed, but not just horrible. And I could see it happening. And they tried to build that into a story. And then it turned out, no, it was obliterated like nobody's ever seen before. And that meant the end to their nuclear ambition.
Everything is like nobody has ever seen before. Everything, right? Everything with Trump is unprecedented. It's just nobody's ever seen before. He sounds like I don't know, like I don't have kids, but he sounds like a toddler who's like half asleep, like in front of the TV or something. He really sounds completely loopy and out of it. And he's talking about bombing another country, and particularly its nuclear sites. I mean, no one ever accused the CIA and the banks of wanting someone intelligent to be president, right? So, just to be fair. Right? No one ever accused the ones that run the country of actually wanting someone smart in power. Anyway, that's not to of course, when I say that is not to absolve him of agency and responsibility and guilt and his criminality in his behavior. Here's something else that's also completely unhinged from Donald Trump. So Khamenei gave a speech, okay, where he talked about basically the outcome of the war and so on. And as a matter of fact, I'll pull it up and we'll play that for a bit, and then we'll play and then I'll read to you what Trump said. Just briefly, right?
الله الرحمن الرحیم سلام و درود فراوان
Yeah, you should be able to see that.
عزیز و بزرگ ایران.
Okay, so this is a long one. I'm not going to play all of it. I'm just going to go to the relevant parts that Trump is commenting about. If I can bloody find them quickly. Hurry up and
با این تاریخ، ایران با این فرهنگ، ایران با این عزم پولادین ملی، اسم تسلیم برای یک چنین کشوری مایه استهزاء کسانی است که ملت ایران رو میشناسند. لکن این اظهار او یک حقیقتی رو لو داد. آمریکایی ها از اول انقلاب با ایران اسلامی مشغول معارضه هستند.
Okay, and then here's Trump's post on Truth Social, his bloody wretch of a platform, and he says this. Okay, so he says, why would the so-called supreme leader, I don't know why he starts like that, because he is called the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei of the war-torn country of Iran. Again, what is like these weird prefixes that he, rather suffixes that, correct prefixes that he keeps putting on there. Like, he keeps adding these weird bunch of adjectives and adverbs before every kind of person and thing that he describes, the war-torn country of Iran, not just Iran, like the so-called leader. Why does he keep writing like this? It's so utterly bizarre. Anyway, why does Khamenei say so blatantly and foolishly that he won the war with Israel when he knows his statement is a lie? It is not so. It is not so. As a man of great faith, he is not supposed to lie. Well, thanks. I mean, I've always relied on Donald Trump for, his expertise on Islamic leaders. He goes on to say his country was decimated. His 3 evil nuclear sites. Again, you see, he doesn't say nuclear sites, the evil nuclear sites, because you obviously have good nuclear sites and then very, very naughty ones. Were obliterated, and I knew exactly where he was sheltered and would not let Israel or the United States Armed Forces, by far the greatest and most powerful in the world. And again, you see how he capitalizes the adjectives like as if he's talking about God, he think, what does he think? He's putting like entries into the Bible, like additional entries or something? Out of his goddamn mind, this guy. I saved him from a very ugly and hold on, I mix it. Yeah, an ignominious death. And he does not have to say thank you, President. In fact, in the final act of the war, I demanded that Israel bring back a very large group of planes, which were heading directly to Tehran. Okay, so he's just told us, by the way, that he was in Tehran. So he's given that away. I don't know if anyone realized that, but maybe he's burned a couple of sources. I don't know. That just kind of crossed my mind. Anyway, that's an operational security failure right there. Looking for a big day, perhaps the final knockout. Tremendous damage would have ensued and many Iranians would have been killed. It was going to be the biggest attack of the war. You see, he puts the war like in capital. I mean, during the last few days, I was working on the possible removal of sanctions. Really? I'll get to that in a second. And other things which would have given a much better chance to Iran at a full, fast and complete recovery. The sanctions are biting, but no, instead I get hit with a statement of anger, hatred and disgust and immediately drop all work on sanctions relief and more. Iran has to get back into the world order flow. What? Or things will only get worse for them. What are you going to do? Bomb them? Sanction them? I mean, you've kind of played all your cards, you fucking chimp. Anyway, they are always so angry, hostile and unhappy, and look what it has gotten them. A burnt out, blown up country. I mean, you are the reason that it's a burnt out, blown up country, if it is that. You literally just said that you refused to lift sanctions and you bombed them. What the fuck? You literally just said that in the same post. A decimated military, a horrible economy, and death all around them. They have no hope, and it will only get worse. I wish the leadership of Iran would realize that you often get more with honey than you do with vinegar. Peace! With 3 exclamation marks. Honestly, I kind of like the style because it's funny. So whoever's writing this, if it is indeed Trump or someone else, keep doing your thing. It's kind of amusing. But honestly, I mean, this is taking a piss a little bit, because saying that he wanted to lift sanctions. I mean, look, my first instinct and my primary response to that statement is that he's lying when he says that he was going to lift sanctions, because Donald Trump and all US presidents lie. Most politicians lie. Also, the reason he left the JCPOA was literally to put sanctions on Iran. And the reason Iran have been increasing their nuclear program and or rather doing a partial withdrawal from the JCPOA during the last couple of years is because of the lack of sanctions relief. So this doesn't make any sense to me. This is Trump contradicting Trump, okay? Which he does all the time. And yes, I know, he's an idiot. We know. My point is, if this is true, let's argue the possibility or the hypothesis that this might be actually true, that he was actually considering lifting sanctions. Well, that would reveal a lot, because that would actually mean that they failed their objectives, which it would certainly seem that way, and that they might have been looking for some kind of agreement or appeasement. I don't know to what extent, but honestly, the thing is with American diplomacy, it's like no matter what they say or no matter what they do, even when they did sign the nuclear deal, Obama, who was in power or who was in the White House at the time, never even really applied it from day one. They were already kind of jerking the Iranians around. Okay, that's very important to remember and to note. So it's so difficult to take anything that's being said seriously, because even if it was actually done in good faith, or let's say done for real in reality, it's like it could have also just been a bunch of bollocks. I mean, it's like it's all kind of just muddy and unclear, and just what is he? He's just angry basically that you know, Khamenei made a speech. I mean, what the fuck did you expect? Of course he's going to make a bloody speech. Of course he's going to make a bloody speech. It's just been a war and has been seen for you know, just over a week. Of course there was a bloody speech coming. What do you think he's going to go? He's going to go and tell the whole people, oh yeah, the Americans crushed us. We were humiliated. You know, Trump always acts like he understands Putin, and you know, he understands like all these strong leaders, and he seems certainly to appreciate that kind of characteristic and you know, bravado and braggadocio and this kind of posturing, and he does it himself all the bloody time. He's doing it in this statement, in all of his statements, right? He's posturing, and then he doesn't understand when his counterpart, well, relative counterpart, right? They're not counterparts, but basically when Khamenei is doing the same thing. Come on, I mean, and he, you know, he dropped working on sanctions. No, I think that's still a bunch of bollocks. I think there was nothing about sanctions. He's just trying to taunt them and look tough in front of Americans. That's really what's going on here, right? That's really what's going on. You've had 7 years. First of all, you are the one that put sanctions on Iran, number one, okay? But even then, you had 7 years to undo that, and you didn't undo it. So I really doubt that the tipping point was a harmless 10-minute speech by Sayyid Ali Khamenei. I really, really, really doubt that. Okay, that's just Trump being his usual dick self. Okay, his usual Richard. So that's really all that it is. Now, when it comes to the Israelis, their Weizmann Institute of so this is a scientific institute that the Iranians hit, and honestly, that was really one of those moments where I thought, damn, the Iranians are not playing around. You know, because people always say this bollocks about, oh, they're choreographing and telegraphing their moves and it's all performative. And I mean, I'm looking at Tel Aviv being hit with hypersonics and I'm going, are we watching the same war? And then when they killed the Iranian scientists and they hit the Iranian nuclear sites, Karaj, Fordow, Isfahan, Natanz, and then Iran hit the Weizmann Institute, I was like, oh. And it appears the damage there was so bad, it's cost them hundreds of millions of dollars. And keep in mind, the Israelis will try to sell you this idea that, well, oh, it's just a lab that does, like, you know, they do really nice, lovely Care Bear research, you know, about cell regeneration and heart disease. Yeah, a bit. But primarily, the primary function, the most important, and the value of that institute is the research and development that it does for Israeli weapons, particularly with Elbit systems. Okay, so the Iranians hit a scientific / military target. Okay, just like the Israelis, of course, will tell you that when they bomb a nuclear site, that's also a military target, right? And even when they murder scientists at home with their families, they call that a military target, even though it's not. Well, at least Iran didn't bomb anyone at home, but you know, they hit the lab itself, and that cost the Israelis a ton of money and set them back significantly. I'm trying to find the article. I had it pulled up over here. We've got so many bloody tabs open. Yeah, so just to give you an example, okay? Some of the things that they research at Weizmann. So I told you already, Elbit Systems, which is the biggest Israeli weapons manufacturer. Those are the factories primarily, not the only ones, not only ones, but primarily the ones that Palestine Action smashed up in the UK. So they have these branches in the UK that build drones and you know, manufacture other parts for Israel, and Palestine Action go and you know, smash them up. So they also do R&D for cyber weapons, cyber warfare. For drones, there's also stuff, research they do in terms of artificial intelligence and that kind of model, and so they basically train models, AI models there as well. And they're also involved in Israel's nuclear program, so it's not just when it comes to conventional weapons or cyber weapons. And I'm trying to find that figure. Yeah, $570 million. That's the estimated damage. 45 labs. Okay, 45 labs. Gone. And you should keep in mind that, for example, when Israel Channel 13 are saying there are many casualties in the army bases and strategic facilities, but because of the Iranian missiles, but we haven't been able to discuss them until today. So what they're basically saying is that Iran spanked them very, very hard, and they haven't been able to disclose, because of the military censor, of course, the full extent of the damage. And I also believe the Iranians are not giving us the full picture. Again, I told you this. It's nothing, specific to Iran or Israel. It's just in a war, you're always going to hide your losses, or try to hide your losses, minimize your losses, and maximize your gains and wins. It's, for several reasons, for morale, for operational security, for propaganda, etc. So, it's normal that both sides do this. But I think it's fair to say, given the density, the population density of the settlers, also just the how small occupied Palestine is compared to Iran, the fact that the Iranians kept lobbing these volleys and salvos and missiles that half of the time weren't stopped, I think that it caused a lot of damage, and we're not hearing anywhere near, or seeing anywhere near the scale of the full scale destruction. Not to mention the fact that the Israelis publicly said that any Israeli who's caught filming is going to be punished, arrested, jailed. Right? Ben Gvir, the security minister, was saying that. And also they banned foreign crews. I saw several journalists, American, German, so on, not complaining, but basically admitting, saying that, yeah, we've been stopped from filming. And again, you can argue that's for operational security, sure. But me, when I'm doing an analysis on this war, I'm trying to see what the damage is. So something's being hidden. That doesn't change the fact that they're hiding the scale of the damage. So here's another interesting one I just saw randomly, by the way. Okay, so this is from the Times of Israel. Reports say apartment block and mall near the IDF headquarters in Tel Aviv were damaged during the war with Iran. I think you already know the point I'm going to raise is that, if that were in Gaza, the Israelis would say, oh, well, Hamas are putting the Palestinians, their neighbors, using them as human shields. They put their headquarters near the mall. They put their headquarters underneath the hospital, blah, 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 blah. But it's okay for Israel to do it. Right? Just a small side note. I mean, obviously, no one's saying you should bomb fucking civilians. That's obviously not my fucking point. I mean, if that's your conclusion from what I'm saying, just go watch something else, please. Leave me alone. But the point is the hypocrisy that's going on, and it's not even just hypocrisy, because hypocrisy would imply that the Palestinians are actually maybe doing that. No. It's number one, the Israelis lie about the Palestinians doing that, and then number two, the Israelis do it themselves, and they're the only ones that bloody do it. Okay, and that needs to be pointed out, because we constantly hear, charred babies and charred civilians and blown up ambulances and hospitals being justified, or attempts to justify that with this exact same bloody argument, and we hear it almost on a daily basis. So it has to be also expunged and exposed and dealt with and demolished and dismantled on a daily basis. And there you go. So now, just again to conclude all of this, IAEA cooperation has been suspended from Iran's side. Okay, we don't know where those 400 kilograms of uranium went. My guess, they're in a safe place. That's just my guess. As I correctly predicted, Fordo seems to be unscathed, or shall we put it perhaps more differently, Iran's nuclear program is unscathed. It's been set back by a few months, and I told you that that's probably what would happen, just based off of common sense, based off of the fact that they've tried to assassinate and bomb Iran and its nuclear sites and commanders dozens of times, and it didn't really achieve anything. So Iran's nuclear program is the genie that's out of the bottle. You understand? The cat is out of the bag. There's nothing you can do now. And I think Grossi himself, by the way, used not those exact terms, but he said something similar in the sense that basically you can't contain that knowledge, right? I think those are the terms that he used. That you can't contain that knowledge, and Iran is a big country. Okay, so in addition to suspending cooperation, they've also Grossi is no longer allowed to go to Iran himself. Inspectors not allowed to do their jobs. Cameras have been removed as well. Remember, some of those cameras were part of the AP or the CSA, and some of them were installed voluntarily, completely outside of the framework of any deal between Iran and the agency. So those are some of the cameras that Iran removed a few years ago, I think in 2021. And of course, they don't tell you that Iran installed them voluntarily in the first place under no obligation or part of any deal. But they just tell you the part that Iran is removing them, like to paint Iran as kind of like being some kind of scheming, dishonest actor. But yeah, that's what mainstream media do. So anyway, and the Israelis, so obviously Iran have taken a massive toll in terms of casualties, right? They lost all these scientists and military commanders, 2 wartime chiefs of staff. I mean, unheard of, really unheard of. And the funeral that they held yesterday, it was yesterday, they held a big funeral for everyone in all the martyrs in Tehran. And I'll show you just a video where you can see kind of the scale of it and some footage of what was going on. Give me a second to just get this out here. So yeah, Professor Merendi was kind enough to post these, so I'll just flick through the 4 clips that we have over here. And again, you can see it's a very large turnout, and the country right now in Iran, it's at a very, very interesting point, because they've been more united in the last week or two than I would say since the revolution. Or maybe, I mean, when we say revolution, it's 79, but after that, 80 to 88, just after you had the Iran-Iraq war. And yeah, so I think that's an accurate assessment. I think that's very, very accurate or fair to say that Iran is probably more united today than it's ever been since the 1980s, right? And all those attempts to kind of fracture the society didn't work. And you see that expressed not just in the rhetoric and, the kinds of all the various Iranians around the world and inside the country, even people who are opposition or people who are exiled or expats, saying it on camera, but also in the funeral processions themselves. That's in Tehran right there. So they suffered a lot of casualties, a lot of martyrs, and when I say a lot, I don't just mean in terms of quantity, but in terms of stature. Okay, so they did lose, the significant and important military and scientific personnel, and of course they were killed along with their families too, which makes it all the more barbaric. But in terms of military analysis and what did Israel and the United States achieve? I mean, obviously they want to butcher Iranians into submission. We know that. But their stated goals, their openly stated goals of, we want to cripple Iran's nuclear program, as if they even have the right to do that, right? But they failed at that. Their stated goals failed. And, this is kind of like what we would talk about with Gaza. I mean, what did the Israelis declare as their stated goals? They wanted to destroy Hamas, destroy the infrastructure, and they failed at that, right? They also said they want to basically, they also said that they... Sorry, I don't know if that was drowned out for a second, right? I'll repeat what I just said again, either way, just to be safe, just to be sure. But the Israelis and Americans had a stated goal of crippling Iran's nuclear program, and they failed at that. And it's similar to how they failed in Gaza with crippling Hamas and Hamas's infrastructure. They haven't failed, though, with their other stated goal, which is ethnically cleansing Gaza and stealing the land. That's still ongoing, actually. And they might even actually succeed with the former as well. But when it comes to this small episode, if you want to call it that, or this skirmish, because I think this is far from over. And honestly, I doubt this ceasefire will hold. But, they'll be back. I guarantee you they'll be back. This is not over. That's a promise. They'll be back. They failed for the time being, okay? And Iran has come out relatively unscathed, not on a humanitarian toll or humanitarian side, but in terms of their military, their government, their nuclear capabilities, they're fine. They're going to be able to continue. And they still have that choice right now. They can still make that decision to break out. They can go ahead and build the bomb if they want to, and say screw the NPT. And as a matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe that whole bill to suspend cooperation was a more calculated move than just outright withdrawal. Because if you go ahead and say, well, screw it, we're leaving the NPT altogether, then you're really making it clear. You're kind of advertising and broadcasting to the world that you're going to go and build a bomb, right? So whereas if you just say, okay, well, we're suspending it, who knows how long that's going to go on for? It's not a hard break. It looks like a temporary measure, and you might be able to go and build a bomb, and then just you pull an American or an Israeli move. You just announced your withdrawal the day before the bomb is done, and then you haven't broken any laws, right? You do it like an American fucking lawyer. So anyway, that might be a more reserved or a more reserved and tempered way of building it without drawing any attention. Just an idea. I have no clue, honestly. I'm just speculating or rather analyzing what their moves might be right now. But in any case, it's not a hard break. So they've left room for diplomacy, and that's kind of that's always been Iran's signature move or style throughout all of this dilemma, this saga with the US and Israel and the nuclear program, is that they've always made sure to never burn their bridges. Okay, that's always been Iran's style. Perhaps even to the point that it's a bit too naive. Some might argue, right? Some people do argue that in Iran they had enough. They want to get rid of any cooperation with the West and just go and build the bomb. Right? That is a more and more popular position in Iran today than it was, for example, 10 years ago. Much more popular, right? People have really had it up to here. But in any case, the Israelis, I mean, I think really what Iran gained from this, if they gained anything, I mean, it's not like they started it, but they gained a lot of valuable intelligence when they struck that US base, because even if that was also so-called, supposedly choreographed or performative, you're still getting good intelligence from the readiness level, the response time, and so on. So it's not completely useless. You're still benefiting from that. And afterwards, of course, if you look at their they were able to deplete their older missiles, or rather get rid of their older stockpiles, and then they were also able to go ahead and make room for their newer hypersonics to fill up their warehouses and bunkers and so on. And also they're bringing in fresh blood now. I mean, obviously, I think they would have preferred not to have anyone martyred, but you're going to have more fresh blood and fresh, ideas coming into the military, into the nuclear program, and so on. So, basically, this has just been a massive test trial for the bigger war that's coming. And I said that they're going to be back because if you look at what they did with Syria, they spent 60 years on Syria and they did not stop, and they got their way in the end. Okay, I know people think, the war was like 14 years from 2011 to 2015. No, it's been going on for much longer than that, really. And in the end, they got what they wanted, and I think that they're going to do the same with Iran, in the sense that they're going to come back and they're going to keep going and persisting until they get Iran. So, it's very risky. It's very, very risky, and they need to make some very calculated moves, the Iranians. They really need to think hard and well about what they're going to do next to avoid suffering the same fate as Syria.